Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. I'm excited to kind of go over some of the stuff this week because a big part of one of the podcasts that I follow was about real estate, and I feel like I have a bunch to contribute there. I did spend 7 years as a real estate agent in the Baltimore area, and I really loved it. It was a service job, just like pharmacy, except it allowed me a freedom I didn't really even know existed, and I'm going to talk about that as well a little bit later. So let's just kind of start off and go through some of the things that I put up recently, and then we'll kind of talk and see what the thought leaders in the industry are doing. I put up a BCPS study guide and BCPS review free materials that you can find in 7 places. So it's just a YouTube video, maybe 3 minutes, and it's just got a ton of links to different books, whether ebook, audiobook, and then some of the best websites in terms of BCPS. So if you're thinking about going down that road, or maybe you are thinking, well, after residency, what exactly do I do? And BCPS is a lot of what you do, especially if you're inpatient. So something we're really looking at. Still looking to add stipends for ASHP. I can't make it. Some of my friends also can't make it just because of some conflicts. I work, Monday through Thursday teaching, and when the conference is Sunday through Thursday, it kind of makes it a little bit tough. So, but I will be sending at least 1, maybe up to 3, depending on who we get on board. But definitely going to have some travel stipends, so watch out for that information as it comes. We'll probably have that same contest, just Facebook likes, and I'm curious to see how it works because I know APHA is grouped, and I know that some of the ASHP groups are maybe a little bit newer, a little bit smaller, but certainly not any less powerful. So I'm curious to see how the response is from ASHP versus APHA. Let's go on to TLDR. So TLDR, if you're on his email list, you certainly got a recent email, but he also has this how to verify medication orders like a pharmacist boss. And again, I kind of talked about that last time, but just that being an inpatient pharmacist is so different than anything that I'd done. I'd always been an outpatient pharmacist in community, and I thought about working in a hospital in an outpatient pharmacy, but never, ever thought about inpatient. And really, because of the number of people that are graduating with residencies now, it's almost required to get that. I don't want to say totally required because you could see Paul Tran had a video, and I don't think he ever had a residency, but he had lots of experience. So you might still be able to find a job or two out there that allows you to do some hospital work. But again, the residency seems like it's part of the deal. Real life pharmacology. I know that Eric released a new episode on warfarin just after the carbidopa-levodopa episode. So it's really nice to hear somebody talk about what's going on, what's up to date, and it's just 12 minutes. So a really quick episode just to keep your clinical knowledge sharp. Something really cool came out from James Kong, and I met him. He's from the University of Texas. He's a student there, and he had a friend who was a med student, and I think he worked with him to create the Healthcare Scholar. And I just saw this on APHA's listserv, so if you're a member of APHA, make sure you get on it. There's 42,000 people on this listserv. And he's trying to get nursing and medicine and pharmacy together so that when he graduates, he's not in a vacuum. Rather, he has the relationship he needs to work as an intra-professional rather than just a pharmacy professional. So definitely support James Kong, the healthcarescholar.com. I know that getting on there is free, so definitely check that out. The mothership, Pharmacy Podcast Network. There was the RX Buzz podcast, which is a new podcast from the network. Ashley Clevens Hayes sounded like, I think she's a career coach, and She talked about her own story with Todd Urey and how she decided that she wanted to help others get to their career. And then Nicole McClure, who's just a couple miles down the road here, president of TRX Marketing and the host of the Pharmacy Marketing Simplified podcast, had 2 episodes. One was it's spelled RXEED, but I think it's Rickseed difference. I think that's how I heard it when I was listening to the podcast episode with Omar Hassad, and talking about how an independent can maybe survive against the big box chains and really bring in customers and show them the difference there. And the other one was with Betsy Walker, Director of Community Relations, Co-Director of Generation RX. And if you're an APHA, you certainly know Generation RX. They've impacted over 1 million people talking about opioids and those things. So definitely check those episodes out on the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I've been a little reticent to put out multiple episodes. I'll continue to bring in students from time to time, definitely my APPE students. But I just wanted to, I've got 3 books that I'm going to be working on simultaneously here soon. So I want to make sure that I give those their fair due. And then I have over, I think, 100 students now just at DMAC this semester. So just kind of putting everything in order, making sure that I can get teaching the quality that it deserves. But just keep watching out for other episodes. But I'll continue to keep in touch with you guys at least once a week through this pharmacy news episode that I like to do. YFP, or the Year Financial Pharmacist, had a 2-episode series, and it was Nate Hendrick of, I forget his nickname, I think it's Real Estate Pharmacist or Real Estate RPH, and he talked about 6 different things that go along with home buying, and I wanted to make sure to talk with you guys about my own experience with each of those 6 steps. I think that that's certainly something that I have experience with, and I guess home buying is such a personal thing. I remember when we were coming to Iowa, how I was like, well, we're just going to get an apartment or something, right? And it just ended up being, let's get a full house. And who knew that 2 years later we would fill all 4 bedrooms, one for me and Mindy, and then the triplets each took one. We had such a tough time when we first started with them. I actually wouldn't even build the cribs. She had to have my brother-in-law come over and build it because I didn't want to build a crib if the worst happened. So I was both emotional wreck and hopeful at the same time, but now we have 3 7-year-olds, and my wife left me for the weekend, so I put the kids to bed, so they may come down and sneak up on me here while I'm doing the podcast, but she's down in St. Louis watching the Cardinals, but kind of love getting to hang out with them, and sometimes it's just kind of cool to have the kids to yourself and get to have some fun with them. So what I want to kind of lead with that is that there's a security in knowing that this is our home, and that if we had to, we could liquidate 401ks and some bank accounts to pay it off, and that we would not have to move. I think that's a tremendous difficulty, and I'm not talking about moving because you're in the military, it's part of your job, something like that. I'm talking about having to move because you can't afford to buy and you rent, and then all of a sudden landlord says, yeah, I'm going to give you 60 days and then it's time for you to go, or something like that. And so much about what we talk about, especially when we're talking to real estate agents, we're really talking numbers, and one of the couple, if you're in a couple, is probably going to be a very bottom line person, very numbers based person. But the other person is going to be very much a nest person, and very much going to be looking at the home as a place that they're going to have a family, a place of security, a place they can come home to. And I love being here, and I love my home. It's not a huge house by any means, but obviously living in central Iowa versus living in Maryland in the DC suburbs certainly can get a lot more home for the money. So what I have here, if you were to compare apples to apples, my home in Baltimore that I had that was 18 feet wide, 2 bedrooms up, a very, very small basement, but you could still live there. That and this home are about the same, and that had 1 parking space in the back versus a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath. 3.5 baths, 5 bedrooms if you count the basement. But again, living in central Iowa, I absolutely love it. Would have never discovered it if it weren't for my wife, but I'm so happy here and so much easier to live here. So I want to go through these steps one at a time, kind of take my time with it and kind of tell you what I think. So step one is the hardest one. Step one says, are you ready to buy a home? And I think most people are going to plow through this one regardless. It says, take the time, look at your budget, current debt to income ratio, and so forth. And honestly, I think that, saying we're going to wait to buy a home is equivalent to we're going to wait to have sex for the first time. Like, it's that hard because it's such an emotional jump that when you get to go from renting to knowing that your payment will be the same for the next 30 years, and even better, it might be no payment after you're done paying it off, or you can get rents from someone that lives in your house, is a completely different thing. And you're just not the same after you've owned a home, and assuming you're just not the same after you've had sex for the first time. I don't want to make it about that, but I'm just saying that it is, to make it logical, to make it forensic, I think is almost impossible. So you're going to find, if you want a home, you're going to find a way to make it your home. So I think the caveat with that one is going to be smart with your stupid. I think the first time you go to college, the first time you buy a home, there are many mistakes that happen, and trying to minimize those mistakes so that you can survive it and continue to move on financially. But there are some things that you can do, and I've been listening to YFB a long time, and they give some great advice. And I know that one of the Tims is going through the home buying process now, kind of a great thing. But the more people you can bring into this circle, the more people that can help you with it. I've just, as a real estate agent, I saw the most rational people I knew as couples go absolutely crazy in between the buying process. So it's an emotional jump, but the more kind of logic you can put into it, the better it's going to be. In terms of like deciding what home is going to be perfect for you, many times as you start the home buying process, you're like, we're going to have to build because there is no home that matches what it is that we want. And it's kind of funny that on the other end, I just kind of didn't really have a ton of must-haves except for location. I just knew that where we live now felt a lot like my home back east, back when I was in Rockshire, actually, when I was in Rockville. Rockshire was a suburb, or not a suburb, but a small part of Rockville. And, it was kind of near the pool, kind of near the ball fields, and kind of near the schools, and I just really enjoyed that. So in terms of location, it's really kind of deciding what it is that, what really makes you feel like you're at home. And for me, it was really not about numbers when it came down to this second step. It was really about, I just felt at home in Ankeny, and I went to West Des Moines. And although the homes were $30,000 more for about the same home, that wasn't really it. I felt at home here, and I couldn't really put my finger on it, but it just felt like so much like where I grew up, and that it was just where I wanted to be. So that's, we agreed, and Mindy ended up living a mile from her high school where she grew up, which was not really what she wanted to do when she first got in, but it's been kind of a godsend with the triplets. Step 3 is assembling your team. And we can kind of talk about which is step 1, step 2, step 3, but assembling your team, you don't really have to do that much if you have a really good real estate agent, because a really good real estate agent should have referrals to all of the people that you'll need. And I think it's somewhere around 18 people that are involved in any real estate transaction. And Lisa Schofield, who helped me with my home in Tempe, we bought our own house here, and then Susie Sheldall helped me buy the home in South Ankeny. And those two real estate agents, Susie and Lisa, were so good and knew so many people that there wasn't a single thing through the transaction that we didn't know of someone that could do what needed to be done. So don't let the overwhelm of, oh my gosh, I got to find all these people. One great real estate agent can already have those relationships. As you went to episode 2, they talked about pre-approval, and honestly, when you talk about pre-approval, that should be the first thing that you do. I think that going to the bank, just making it real, and he talks about the difference between pre-approval and pre-qualification. One is just kind of a, hey, thanks for visiting a bank. You at least visited a bank. And then the other one is actually getting the approval and putting, the W-2s and all those things through. But if you have a pre-approval, it makes not only better, especially if you're in a hot market, seller's market, you can also really engage with the real estate agent, because a real estate agent working with somebody who's pre-approved is in a much better position to make negotiations. So when I was with Susie, when I was with Lisa, in both cases, I came in pre-approved 20% down, and I even went up to 25% down when I was talking about Arizona. So I was putting the muscle in and saying, hey, look, I'm probably one of the best buyers that's going to come in, and I have a little bit of wiggle room, or I could win, maybe the home that I really wanted. Step 5, finding the home. That's usually step 1 for everybody, just kind of looking on Zillow or going on wherever you want to go, and just finding a place that you really, really, love, and eventually you'll be able to find the place that you want. But I think step 5 actually happens through the whole thing. Then when we're talking about step 6, it's about inspecting, insuring, and closing on your home, and Nate gives some great advice. And I can't tell you how important it is, although I probably skipped this a couple of times because the home inspector I had back east was so good that I just wouldn't go with him, because he would take 4 hours to do the home inspection. But he was phenomenal. Anyway, but making sure that the home is, sound. I know in some of these hot sellers market, the temptation is to waive the home inspection. Maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe there won't be problems, but I can tell you that there's probably going to be something that comes up that you waive off. And I ran into it, and I waived a home inspection once, and I definitely regretted it. So my personal opinion is don't waive the home inspection. Insurance, certainly there are different ways to go with this one, and I learned the hard way that flood insurance is important. We haven't had a flood here since '92, or that area wouldn't have flooded since '92. But I got into the home a year ago, and it flooded, and I spent about $4,000 because I didn't have the right insurance. So getting the right insurance, learn from other people's mistakes, but definitely add flood insurance, and then. Closing on your home is a very exciting day, getting the keys. But I want to tell you a little bit about something called buyer's remorse, and I don't think they talked about this. Buyer's remorse means that you get into your home, and maybe you waive the home inspection, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to go wrong? And you're just going to wait for something to happen. Once you're in there, it's going to take some time to adjust. It's your new home. You can be like, oh my gosh, look at all the things we didn't see. Look at all the things we should have done. Now you're going back on Zillow like, oh my gosh, look at this other home that just came up for $10,000 less. We could have gotten that one. And all these things happen, and my recommendation is to just let it go. Just engage with your new home. This is your home. Make the best of it, and just kind of let that go. Eventually that'll go away, but do be warned that it's very common for, as soon as you kind of go through with it, it's like, hey, was this really the best deal I could possibly get? And the best, I think, advice I got was something like, if you got the best you could at the time, then you've done the best that you can. And that's kind of what I went with. But, YFP, really just outstanding 2-part series, 2-part podcast. Put together really, I know they've got a sheet on their website, the First Time Home Buying Quick Start Guide. and just really recommend those guys. And checking out how they go through the home buying process. It's very linear logical. There's some emotion in it, but those are two very linear logical guys talking about it. So it may kind of, I don't want to say put off, but you definitely want to bring in a third party who is kind of looking at the nesting part of it, the really emotional side of it, and kind of saying, numbers be damned. This is the home I want. Let's figure out how to make it happen. And what usually ends up happening is some kind of compromise that ends up working out pretty well. RX Radio, I don't know if I mentioned it, but Dr. Richard Waite, he had this new book, and that was pretty cool. It's First-Time Pharmacist, and that's been doing really well on Amazon, I think. Especially the print book has been doing especially well, so maybe it's a good gift. And he had a chat with a district manager, and this kind of went with last week's. The Happy Farm D had a blog post called How to Guarantee or Hire the Right Pharmacist. And I think so many times as we're going into a job interview, the thing that we're thinking about is, man, I need a job. What do I have to say to get this job? And the easiest way to figure out what you have to say is to look at the other side. And that chat with the district manager was, I want to say it was about an hour long, and he talked with him, and it was just a really, really good way of hearing how someone who is a district manager can't just go in and kind of count some pills to get things moving, or can't just pick up some phone calls to make things happen. He's now in charge of X number of stores, so it's about, he said motivating people, but I think it's about certainly motivating people, coaching people, getting the right people in there. And if you really, really listen to what he has to say, and you really, really kind of put in your brain, okay, this company needs this. This is how I match that. And this is how I can learn the rest of that. Then I think you're really in a much better position to get a job, especially in this kind of environment that we're in right now. I do want to mention another pharmacist author, Dr. Adam Martin, Fit Pharmacist. He had a new book come out, and it's called, he's got a lot of letters to start it. So it's RXU, The Pharmacist Survival Guide to Managing Stress and Fitting in Fitness. And I can't tell you how many hours I work out a day, because you wouldn't believe me, because it's such a disappointment, like what body I have with the number of hours that I put in. But in general, I put in 90 minutes to 120 minutes a day of working out. And I just enjoy it. Like it's not a thing for me. And usually when I'm working out, I'm usually watching a movie or reading or listening to a book. Certainly not with CrossFit. When I go to CrossFit, I mean, I'm all in with that. But and I have loved that. But definitely check it out. Definitely think it's a pretty good book. Especially, I guess when I look at a book like that, I'm thinking, what's the one tip or two tips I'm going to get? And when I was on a podcast interview with him, he talked about the water test, where just for fun, instead of getting a snack, go get some water and drink some water and see if you're still hungry. And I found that really 9 times out of 10, I was just thirsty. But my body was just saying, look, if you're not going to give me water, then I'm going to go get some food, and that food will have some water in it, and then I'll get you some more food and so forth. So definitely recommend RXU. I checked it out, so definitely make sure that you check it out as well. Let's see, Kevin Yee. He's had a couple new ones, but I think what I kind of was, if you look at numbers in terms of what people are really listening to, if you look at RX Radio's numbers, and they're on SoundCloud, like how many times that somebody's listened to him, he gets usually somewhere around, I don't know, somewhere between 400 and 600 listens. Sometimes 7 and 8, but what he got was 1,000 downloads of Should You Change Careers, and I think that was really, really something that hit home for a lot of people. Kevin Yee, who gets, somewhere between 500 around for most of his episodes, got almost 9,000 views on Why I Quit Pharmacy from 2 months ago. Why Pharmacy is Not a Good Career, 7,000 views. And I think what people are looking for are answers. They're like, I don't know what to do. Like, things are bad and I can't leave my job because I won't get another one. But there's not really another job that I want to go to that's here. Maybe I'm place-bound. Like, I'm place-bound. If I was in pharmacy, I had to. There's no, okay, honey, we're going to move to Minnesota or St. Louis or whatever. There's none of that. And I'm not saying I'm looking for a job, but I'm very happy with what I have. But I think people are looking for answers, and that's what I'm going to try to keep doing as I'm going through this. When I first started the podcast or podcasting, I thought it was about pre-pharmacy students, and I found that very few pre-pharmacy students actually listen to pharmacy podcasts because they're really not part of the network. Once you get to pharmacy school, that's when you kind of really get into it. And most of the listeners I had were in pharmacy school, and then to some extent the residents, and then the people that worked after. Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a pretty good mix of all three. But really, pre-pharmacy students really aren't in until the pharmacy school hits. So just kind of interesting. Brian Fung, I haven't heard anything new from him. He had that great one with perspectives from a residency program director. And then I'll hopefully talk to Brandon Dyson before you get to ASHP and give you a couple of tips on what to do if you are going to go out to Anaheim and kind of make the best of it. But honestly, my recommendation is going to be talking about the events after, because I went down on the floor where there were those 10,000 people or whatever it was, and it literally, I tried to take a YouTube, I might still have the YouTube video, and it was like 11 minutes of people just continuing to go into that hall, and so these thousands and thousands of people. But then I went to the Maryland reception, and the very first thing I saw was 2 residency directors. No residents, no chief residents, no whatever. It was just, here's a residency director, here's another residency director. So if you really want to meet them, you want to talk to them, go to the state conferences, especially if you're from that state. It'll be it's a much easier thing. And for the most part, everybody's drinking, everybody's being human, everybody's not pretending. And that daytime thing, it's such a I don't want to say it's inauthentic, but it's just kind of like, you get dressed up, I'll get dressed up, we'll talk formally, you ask me the questions, I'll present my residency, whereas you just get to one of these state things and you're like, oh, you're human, yeah, you were a resident once, you understand what we're going through, you understand what questions I have, and it's just kind of refreshing to go to these things afterwards. But that's my recommendation. And those, you don't actually have to sign up for the meeting. So if you're on a budget, just go to the things after. Haven't heard anything new from Paul Tran. I did see some stuff on Facebook. I continue to live vicariously through him, through Tyler Dalton, through the single people, the people with girlfriends, the people newly married, anyone that doesn't have kids. Continue to live vicariously through some of their vacations. But I love my job as a parent, and I love what I get to do as well. So, but anyway, that kind of went a little bit long. But anyway, I will talk to you guys next week. Always happy to answer questions. Just email me, aagara@dmac.edu.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.